Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of the Bitcoin News Show right here on the CryptoCast Network. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, so much for joining us yet again on this beautiful Sunday afternoon to talk Bitcoin. We have a lot to cover, guys, today. A lot to do with the SEC. But before we do that, we, of course, are screen sharing our website here at CryptoCast.network, where you can find the links to our YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, iTunes, and RSS. And we actually do have some merch on the website, too, you guys can check out to support the show. And we are screen sharing our QR code because this is a community supported YouTube channel, and we really appreciate all the donations and feedback from you guys. And then also going to shield Mr. Tone Vase's conference, guys, over there in Las Vegas, Nevada, the beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada, on January 24th and 26th at unconfiscatable.com. That is a Bitcoin, not blockchain conference, guys. I'm really looking forward to this. It's just going to be all Bitcoiners. We're talking, Max Kaiser, Trace Mayer, Giacomo, Peter Todd, Safety, and Jimmy Song, Tone Vase. It's going to be the whole gang, guys. It's going to be all the Bitcoin people. So I'm really looking forward to that. So definitely check that out. There's about 40 tickets left at 0.01 Bitcoin, or sorry, 0.1 Bitcoin, 40 tickets left at that price. So with that aside, guys, let's stop screen share and get into your quick bit section here. Stop screen share and bring it over here. So we have a few things to cover before I introduce the guests, guys. So before we do that, let's get into the quick bit section. All of the links to these news and to these people are in the show notes below, as always, guys. So here we go. We got Coinbase this morning, guys, sent out an ETH pump mail. It was kind of crazy. Like, I'm not really sure why they think they can get away with something like this, but it was kind of absolutely ridiculous. They sent out this email to everybody, to all the customers, about having this big, huge positive spin about how amazing Ethereum is, and it didn't, link to anything except for the price. So that was kind of freaking crazy. So check that out, guys. Then we got Bitmain no longer under influence of Jihan Wu. So apparently there was a lawyer that's talking about that there's been a bit of a reorg in Bitmain, and Jihan Wu no longer has really a whole lot of power. So that would be kind of cool. Speaking of Bitmain, they have released their 7-nanometer miner, but guess what? The efficiency is probably, you guys mostly expected, is pretty horrible. It is actually falling way short of all the competition out there. So Jihan, again, seems to be floundering. Bitmain not doing so good. Central Bank of Bitmain over there. And then we got Lightning Network passing over 4,000 nodes, guys, reaching all-time high capacity. Pretty awesome stuff. Check out that link below. Really cool. And then we have Venezuela over there. Venezuela seems to be, they're still in their hyperinflation problems they got over there. But guess what? It seems to be more and more people turning to Bitcoin because their largest Wal-Mart-like retailer over there just started accepting Bitcoin. So that was pretty interesting. And then we got Bitcoin, a pretty good article here, guys. Bitcoin being a store of value indeed, because if you have held Bitcoin since 2011, you have netted a 0.347 profit per day. So that's pretty awesome. I mean, Bitcoin, there's a lot of people that like to say, oh, Bitcoin's not a store of value. And, there's a lot of people, mainly financial people, right? And people that have interests in other coins, but some of them like to say it's not a store of value. But guys, it just proves them wrong every single day that it continues to be alive. So pretty awesome stuff. 0.347% profit every single day. And then Bitcoin continues to take over the world, guys, because Moscow now seems to be having an estimated 1% or 120,000 people actively using cryptocurrency, according to a new survey from Yandex. And then we got more FUD, guys, from central banks. That's my favorite kind of FUD, guys. My favorite kind is from central banks. We got the ECB official calling Bitcoin an evil spawn of the financial crisis. And yes, of course, it was spawned from the financial crisis in 2008, which, of course, they helped cause. So it is a little bit of truth there, but it's just so fun, guys, to watch all the tweets and replies to their to their tweets. It's pretty funny. Actually, the tweet that I replied telling them that they're just extinct, that they don't know it yet, actually has more likes than their original tweet. And then we got Binance, guys. This is pretty interesting. They just moved $600 million in Bitcoin for just $7. If you can believe that, it's pretty awesome, guys. I mean, it's pretty clear that the traditional financial system holds no chance against Bitcoin. So pretty interesting stuff. And then finally, you guys got to check out the live cast that Tone Vase, myself, and many others conducted. It was actually an 8-hour live stream to cover the BCH fork live, and that was pretty interesting stuff, guys. We had a lot of fun there. There was over 4,000 live viewers on that, so that ended up getting like 40,000 views or something ridiculous like that. So check that out, guys. It was a lot of fun. Really recommend it. Now, with that aside, let's introduce our amazing panelists as usual, guys. We got Mr. Zach Voel from the Coin podcast. Zach, how you doing?
Doing okay, Vortex. It's good to be back. Thanks for having me. Since I was last on the show, I recently relocated to New York, so always stuff going on in Bitcoin.
You bet, man. And just real quick before we introduce the rest of the panelists, I do have to shill my amazing shirt, guys. Check it out. In honor of the BCH fork, we have to shill the Roger shirt, guys. It's pretty funny stuff, guys. It's pretty interesting. This whole fork going on. I don't want to talk too much about it, but there's like 3 chains and it's getting crazy. I want to introduce the rest of the guests here. We got Mr. Gabriel D. Vine. Gabriel, how you doing?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for having me on your show once again. And it's a privilege to be sharing the panel with Russell and Zach.
Yeah. And now let's see, Russell. We had some technical difficulties earlier. Mr. Russell Spears, let's see if you can talk or not. Russell, give me a test. 1, 2, 3. No, still can't hear. Still can't hear you. Sorry, man. Sorry. You just got to test it out. Again, it's the settings at the top, that gear icon settings. But this is how we do it live, ladies and gentlemen. We'll let you keep trying, Russell, and definitely, feel free to chime in if you think you got it fixed. But definitely check on that settings icon at the top, the gear icon. That's where all those settings are happening. Because I've had many issues where sometimes it works locally, but then the Google icon gets messed up. So check that out. But let's get to our first topic. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you guys for in the chat already popping off. We already got 70 live viewers. So let's get into the first topic of the day. The SEC, guys, has charged and settled with EtherDelta. There's a bunch of information here that I want to actually get from the panel to see what their thoughts are. But before we do, I want to just give out a few stats here, because it looks like this might come as a surprise to some people, because EtherDelta is a decentralized exchange, and but it got shut down, right? So it might come to a surprise to some people. But in fact, it looks like that the SEC said that there was a centralized server that was maintained by EtherDelta, where all the transactions went through, that was in addition to the Ethereum blockchain. So maybe it wasn't quite as decentralized as we thought. So let me ask you, Zach, first. Well, first of all, was this really a decentralized exchange, Zach? First off, and then second off, are basically all the other token exchanges next? Because it looks like the SEC wants to go after anybody, all these new token exchanges now, anything that sells something that they call a security, right? So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm definitely not alone in the opinion that EtherDelta is sort of a shot across the bow for all of these nominal decentralized exchanges. I know some people like Udi Wertheimer on Twitter argue that essentially nothing right now masquerading under the label of a decentralized exchange is a truly decentralized exchange. That's a can of worms for another time. But EtherDelta pretty solidly was not a decentralized exchange, and is not alone in being a centralized exchange that is calling itself a decentralized exchange. So securities regulation per se aside, this is a sort of come to Jesus moment for a lot of centralized exchanges pretending to be DEXs, decentralized exchanges, realizing, all right, EtherDelta was shut down. And what this particular action wasn't even against EtherDelta per se, it was against the founder, obviously. And so maybe people who are in Zachary Coburn's situation where they created something they call decentralized and then offloaded it to another company or person or something else, they have some things to get in order, you might say, regarding future action taken by federal or state regulatory enforcement bodies. But yeah, all of that to say, a lot of decentralized exchanges right now are centralized exchanges that just want to borrow the DEX label, but definitely don't deserve it.
Yeah, very interesting, because we see all of these. We saw a lot of these ICOs raise for to be this decentralized exchange that can't actually be shut down. We've seen a couple of these claim to be like that, but we haven't actually really had a chance to prove that. Had a chance to have it actually prove itself, which is pretty interesting to see. Pretty interesting to see now the SEC come in and really kind of prove what they're capable of. So let's ask Gabriel next. Gabriel, what are your thoughts on this? Was this really not a decentralized exchange, Gabriel? And are all the other exchanges sort of next in the SEC's crosshairs?
Regarding the first question, my knowledge about EtherDelta is not really sufficient to comment on their degree of decentralization, but I can say in general, first off, the phrase degree of decentralization is especially valid because decentralization is, you might say it's a spectrum, but I think it's even more complex than that, than just one dimension between centralization and decentralization. There's a lot of room in there to play a lot of different types of projects. I believe we were on the show with you with a gentleman that was involved with an Ethereum-based, that was like a semi-decentralized exchange. Then you've got Liquid sidechain, which would be something that's like maybe 10% less centralized than a regular company, right? You've got like a federation of 6 companies or 16 or whatever. And then you go something maybe like Bitcoin, where it's very decentralized, but even so, you can have minor, pools and sort of consortia, even cabals can come up with, power schemes, there's dangers of centralization that developers and other participants in the ecosystem are constantly defending against, fighting against. And
But Gabriel,
yes,
it's about the permissionlessness, right? Having it permissioned on
absolutely.
those changes.
Sure. No, I mean, the decentralization is kind of like a combination of so many different vectors, so many different angles and different spectra in general that add up to something. It's very probable that pure decentralization would be something that is not even possible in reality, right? Because, like, for example, no one person can possibly be familiar, even Greg Maxwell or Peter Willey or whatever, is not familiar with every single tiny corner of the Bitcoin code base and every single idea that's ever been presented and all, you know what I mean? So it's like even Bitcoin can probably only realistically ever get, say, 96% decentralized or whatever scale. Even any scale you could come up with could be gamed or is not really valid. So it's interesting. It's an interesting question. Oh, this is centralized, that's decentralized. I think that it's a very unnuanced way of talking about these projects. But at the same time, there's a lot of security theater and marketing theater going on with these fake ass white papers. Ethereum itself is far, far more centralized than Bitcoin, for example. And so when you build something on top of Ethereum, you're at the mercy of, a foundation that is a corporation in Switzerland and individuals that have an outsized role, far more outsized than any one Bitcoin developer, for example, Vitalik Buterin. And then you have a company like Consensus, which is, controlling a huge amount of the developer core and things like that. So it's a very complex issue. It's not as simple as black and white, but it certainly can be said, as Zach pointed out, that a lot of projects are way more centralized than they claim to be. And a lot of projects are way over the line regarding I forgot what it's called, the SEC's, sort of line in the sand, the Huber or whatever it's called, the sort of rule that informs their decision whether to consider a given asset a security or not. And a lot of these ICOs are way over the line. And we've been saying this for months. I mean, look Vortex, I've been on your show many times. We've known each other for 4 years, more than 4 years. And we've talked about all these projects over and over and over again. And it was sort of like a hanging threat, it's like a sword of Damocles, right? It's like, I mean, yeah, you and I are libertarians. You might call me an anarchist. I think that regulation is almost uniformly bad, and any good that can come with it is temporary at best. But that's not to say it's not real, and they don't still have a lot of power. And this is a sword of Damocles that's been hanging over the industry. The people have been warned, and this is just the natural consequence that we've been expecting the whole time. So watch out there, people. ICOs are mostly scams. Most of those white papers are copy-paste BS. And nearly all of the projects are going to fail. A large percentage of them, maybe even a third or so, were deliberate scams. Another third are non-deliberate scams where they thought they were going to be able to do it, and they're just completely naive and ill-informed. And we're going to see continued failures, continued implosion. I think that's a lot of the pessimism in the markets right now is due to these scam projects that have yet to have deflated. I mean, a lot of these shit forks and stupid ICO projects, a lot of them have not even imploded yet. And that is sort of has a contagion effect on Bitcoin, even though Bitcoin is the shining jewel that will actually eventually benefit from all these failures of sort of semi-competing projects. So, and I just want to say BISC, while is certainly more centralized than, say, Bitcoin itself, BISC would be by far the most decentralized vision of an exchange, and it's got a roadmap to go even far more decentralized. So I highly recommend everyone to check out bisq.io, BISQ.
Yes, very good points there. Real quick, Russell, before we go, I just want to say lots of good points there. Gabriel, decentralization is absolutely a scale. This is what I try to tell people. In fact, even Matt Corello, one of the Bitcoin developers, started saying that we should use the word trustless instead, because trustless is actually a binary situation where decentralization, as you say, Gabriel, is a scale. And this is what a lot of these projects try to exploit. They try to say the word decentralized, but you notice how they don't use the word trustless. It's very interesting because they in fact are not, and that's okay with them. They don't want to be trustless. Really, the only thing that's trying to be trustless is Bitcoin, and this is, of course, what we try to tell people. Now, when it comes to BISC, I mean, that's seriously the amount of work they had to do to actually try to create a truly decentralized exchange is ridiculous. In fact, they had to write their own protocol. They had to invest a lot of time. I think it was years before it was ready, and even now, it's still like this. There's like a tiny little bit of centralization, but it cannot be. It's to the point to where it cannot be shut down. So if the creator actually left away or walked away, the project itself could always now continue. It is 100% decentralized. And that's really, to my knowledge, the only decentralized exchange that we've seen, because it's going to take years for this technology to really be able to be truly trustless, truly decentralized. A truly trustless, decentralized exchange is going to take a while, because really it's not, it doesn't really go together. Like, for example, with HODL HODL, right? They have their centralized exchange, but guess what? It's non-custodial. It's non-custodial means that you always own your funds. You're always in charge of your own funds, but there is a centralized party, HODL HODL, at your disposal for disputes. They wrote the system, right? They control the exchange, so they make sure that it's always up and running. So they did an interesting combination there of decentralized and centralized. But at the end of the day, a decentralized trustless exchange just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's going to be a while, guys, before we can have something like that. What's going to happen before then is we're going to have something more like HODL HODL, something where it's decentralized exchanges, but they provide non-custodial. So that means that you 100% are always in control of your funds. So it's going to take a while before we see that. And remember, guys, we even see, like, as Gabriel's saying, there's just not a whole lot of traction and adoption of Ethereum products. Like, we look at the DApp radar, right? They're telling us that that IDEX, which is one of their platforms here, had roughly only 1,401 users in the past 24 hours. Like, it's just, and that's also because there's not the technology just not there yet. It's just not ready. These people are using basically beta software, and as we've seen, this stuff can get shut down. And remember, according to this article, like, expect the SEC basically, from their language, to target more token exchanges, whether they're supposedly decentralized or not, right? So let's go with Russell. Russell, got you in here now. We got you talking, so your mic is ready to go. Russell Spears, ladies and gentlemen, I want to get your take on this, on these quote unquote decentralized exchanges, and what do you think is in store more for the SEC? Is this going to, like, really shut down all of these token exchanges? Is every single exchange now going to have to get like a money transmitter license and such to operate anywhere, or is everybody just going to like eschew U.S. customers?
Well, look, you're talking about the exchanges. Look, that's just only going to assume that we're really diving deeper into these altcoins. I'm not really a fan of the altcoins. I think some of them are going to have purpose, as it moves along. But the development of this, I think, is more like, I said this before, but I believe in this Hydra thesis about Bitcoin, right? You're just going to have this core global ledger of agreement, both on value and also as a record, right? And just built around that is going to be all the second layer technologies and stuff. And I understand the nuance now with the Lightning, though. Thank you for that. But still, it doesn't diminish the point that, look, as far as the exchanges go, I don't know what else you could add to it. What Gabriel's already kind of like laid it out. I mean, there's everything that we're putting our energy into, I think, it should be really trying to move on this extensibility of this the main chain, and what happens after that, who knows? But I know the SEC is going to go after everybody that they can. Look, there's some of these ICOs that I do support, actually, but they're trying to disrupt things like Google, the Google search engine. I'm all for that, and I don't care if I make money on this stuff. But my point is that I want to support these projects that if it's a decentralized open platform, and you can start to replace things like Amazon and things that are amicable type of, what I mean? That's what I think we should be supporting. The exchanges themselves, I think, are superfluous, really.
Yeah, but for now, I think there's a whole lot of gamblers out there, right? There's a whole lot of speculators out there that unfortunately are going to keep this kind of thing alive. But I think that we can. What would you say, Russell? We can move towards more a decentralized or more of a trustless way, right? With things like Lightning, we can eventually like have the technology to build like more trustless, decentralized exchanges. But like you say, to what end, right? Just to exchange more altcoins. But hey, there is a lot of projects out there. Maybe that's what speculators want to do. And even if Bitcoin, for example, in an environment where Bitcoin is $1 million a coin, right, and everything else is like penny stocks, there's still going to be a million penny stocks out there, right, when everybody can create their own coin. So it seems to me that there's still going to be people trying to do things with tokens. So is a decentralized exchange still important in that environment, in that world, or not?
Well, to me, the whole point again is that anything that you could create a decentralized platform on, the exchanges as well, that those are great projects. But I mean, the focus, I think. Hey, look, you guys had mentioned Liquid. I know you had a tweet today about Liquid possibly replacing Swift. I mean, do you think it's more secure than Lightning? So, I mean, what's the trade-offs? I think
there is trade-offs, and if I can go into them if you want, real quick.
Yeah.
Just really quick. The trade-offs really are that Lightning is really liquidity. So Lightning is meant for small transactions, just many small transactions. Like we're talking, you can do like micro transactions and even sub-Satoshi transactions, but they're made for small transactions because you need liquidity to pre-fund these channels. Right, but with Liquid, the settlement network, it's a federated thing. So there's only so many parties there, so they can all transfer as much as they want at any time, completely secure with confidential transactions.
Almost like a decentralized or
decentralized
distributed banking.
Yeah, distributed banking. It's definitely another way to do it. Distributed banking with this federation, and so they are allowed to. And this is going to, of course, bring price discovery and other things. So they have each in their own trade-offs. But what would you say then? I guess we kind of got your answer there, Russell. You just basically say that these decentralized exchanges, they're going to probably come up, they're going to probably be there, but they're just not going to be really where people are looking at it. They're not going to be the next Google. They're not going to be the important things that change people's lives. It's just an exchange, right?
Yeah, I think ultimately we're going to have on our own accord, our own devices, often these exchanges, transactions between one another. I know that the big guys are going to want to speculate the money, and that's also important for creating enough liquidity, price discovery. But I think it just suffers a lot of the same problems Gabriel was kind of mentioning.
Russell, what you just said about everybody.
No, Gabriel. We got cut off, Gabriel.
Can I add something? Can I chime in?
So I was going to go to you, Zach. I was going to go to you, Zach, before Gabriel jumped in, but then now we can't hear him. So sorry, Gabriel. Let's go to you, Zach.
I wanted to chime in by saying really quickly. So I'm not a huge fan of altcoins in general, insofar as the altcoins that try to compete with Bitcoin on a monetary scale. But I think it's unrealistic to expect that we will see sort of a point in time where no other blockchain or token project exists apart from except for Bitcoin. I think that's an unrealistic expectation. Given these exchanges, though, I think it's important to understand that the concept of exchange, like in general, requires some sort of centralization. Two people coming to a certain place or point in time to exchange commodities and whatnot. So you can never eradicate some sort of centralized aspect of these exchanges 100%. That being said, what is important about this EtherDelta case is that they acted against the founder of EtherDelta, not yet the exchange itself, because of what was happening on the exchange, that being the buying and selling of unregistered securities. So all of this to say, what I'm taking from this more than I think I've heard some other people discuss is if you want to create a decentralized exchange like your HODL HODL or your BISC or something, the SEC is kind of saying you need to do it anonymously, because if you want to exchange things and then you offload your technology, your protocol or whatnot, and other people use it for things you didn't anticipate, you are still vulnerable, and you obviously can't decentralize your identity, but you can sort of keep it off the table by remaining anonymous. I'm a huge fan of BISC, huge fan of HODL HODL, have had both of them on my show. And obviously each of those have different, you could say, single centralized points of failure within their protocols, much less so than other protocols, but they're also not anonymous. And in the future, I think it will become increasingly more apparent that if you want to build a DEX of any variety, wherever it falls on this sort of spectrum of decentralization, you should really do so anonymously.
Well, I think what this is really also saying is, I think where we differ You think that there's going to be a lot of use cases for altcoins. I'm simply saying that I think that all possible innovations can be built around Bitcoin, second layer and whatnot.
No, I agree.
Well,
In
no,
my
I don't
defense,
think he's.
I'm not.
Well,
In
real
my
quick.
defense, I'm not saying use cases. I'm just saying I think they'll exist regardless of
Yes.
how useless they are. So
Yeah, that's what he's saying. So he's not saying. I don't think Zach anywhere there said that there's just going to be like a ton of these awesome use cases for altcoins. No, just the fact that they're going to exist because, like I said, Russell, same thing is, there's going to be a lot of speculators. There's going to be a lot of gamblers, and now, of course, with this sort of permissionless crypto economy, right? Anybody can sort of boot up a coin, boot up an asset. Even with Raven Coin now, I think Bruce Fenton did a video just recently about how to create your own asset on their chain as well. But it's just going to kind of blow up and go crazy before the world kind of like makes some rules or make some adjustments to be able to contain all this the stuff that's going to be coming in, because it's like the internet. The world had to sort of like adjust to the internet, and we're still adjusting to the internet. For some reason, we still give the president the ability to tweet. Not sure what that's going to end up with, but I think eventually we will see more and more of these open systems. But Gabriel, I'm going to let you try to speak here. Let's see if we can hear you. Go ahead, Gabriel.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Go ahead.
I'll take that as a no.
No, yes,
Hello?
we can. We can hear you, Gabriel.
Okay,
Go
great.
ahead.
I'm just trying to find the best spot here. What Russell was saying about people trading assets peer-to-peer and saying that we don't need decentralized exchanges, well, that would be impossible without a decentralized exchange. What you're just describing there about users able to trade assets back and forth without a centralized party, that's exactly what Bitcoin does, and that's exactly what a decentralized exchange is designed to do. So what you're saying is actually that the future is actually decentralized exchanges, that those will allow peer-to-peer transfers. And in my opinion, it has nothing to do with altcoins. It has to do with any type of scarce asset, any type of scarce digital asset. So exactly as Vortex pointed out, we'll be issuing stocks. There will be digital securities. There already are, right? A lot of these ICOs are technically digital securities. You'll have app coins, you'll have utility coins. None of them will be competing with Bitcoin with money, and all of them will be replacing the existing corrupt infrastructure of the DTCC and other centralized entities, issuing units of assets at will in order to enrich themselves, and it'll replace all that. So all that liquidity that's currently bound up in traditional paper stocks will go to digital assets. None of them will be money, but they will all be very liquid. Although you wouldn't use that, you wouldn't store any wealth in them. They're all speculative more. So that's what I think the vision is really for decentralized exchanges. Not that you're going to be moving monies back and forth, but that you would move digital commodities and sort of digital equities and securities back and forth, along with money, which is Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I think that that's how I think that somehow we're gonna have the split, right? We're gonna have these, like you say, Russell, Zach, anonymous stuff, and then we're gonna have the traditional stuff. But at some point in time, they're going to converge somehow. Whether that's over Lightning, over Liquid, over some kind of network, over some kind of protocol that resides directly connected to Bitcoin. Somehow they're going to eventually have to interconnect, and that's of course when you get really the true freedom, when you can combine anonymous stuff with the traditional stuff. That's a ways away, but obviously they're going to both be moving, towards that direction. They're going to be, in my opinion, both moving in that trajectory, because that's the ultimate trajectory here with Bitcoin is finance, financial freedom, right? Is open finance. So that's going to be interesting things to see. Zach, let's ask everybody to give one last comment on this topic before we move on. Zach, go ahead. What's your final words on this topic?
yeah, I would just reiterate the importance of developing this sort of thing anonymously, and I completely agree. I think we'll see the convergence of maybe more traditional infrastructure and this anonymous, sort of very nascent technology, decentralized exchanges converge in the future. But if we step outside sort of the scope of unregistered securities for a moment and just think about Bitcoin in general, it is very possible, and I would wager even somewhat likely in certain political jurisdictions, that Bitcoin will become illegal. And if your decentralized exchange facilitates the transfer of Bitcoin, that violates certain laws within that jurisdiction, and you will pay for you will be acted against for sort of the crimes you've committed, the violations that have been happening because of what's going on the protocol or the platform you developed. All that to say, even if it's strictly Bitcoin, it still is, or you could imagine a scenario where it would be advisable for your decentralized Bitcoin exclusive exchange to be anonymous. And I think we'll see a lot of that going forward.
Yep, interesting points. Let's go with Russell. Your final thoughts on this topic?
Well, I think the most interesting thing about this space is how it develops and the new forms of logic and how it's being gamed. Great, given our understanding of how things work, inherited from that traditional market thinking, things are going to change. New rules are going to pop up. Look at this, the BCH fork. I know you didn't want to talk about it, but you do have a handsome shirt. Look at their response. That was a game changer, right? I even feel that same way about that. That was a game changer, right? That was an attack on the Bcash brand. Now, neither one of these guys are walking away with that. And I think any fork moving forward they're going to end up encountering this new logic. And yeah, we'll probably have a plethora of these tokens out there. But, and I do get all of you guys' points about the exchange. I won't diminish that. I think I go too far by trying to just discount it. But I just think that there's a new logic that I think that just everything's moving towards the individual having that power. And I think the exchanges, you guys also have given testimony to the fact that it can be, I guess, neutered in a way, right? Once they come down on it, they make Bitcoin illegal. They make the anything that you tag Bitcoin on YouTube, they're going to demonetize it, just like they did with MGTOW. They demonetized all YouTube content with MGTOW. That's a type of attack. Don't think they won't do the same thing with Bitcoin. These are all game-changing moments. And, I agree. It's a Wild West. We can have reasons for many different things, but I think the power is going to be right and directly in the individual's hand.
Yep. And so far, that's, we've seen various different attacks on Bitcoin, many different types of attacks on Bitcoin. We haven't actually seen like a nation state really try to attack Bitcoin as of yet. We saw China last year essentially, sort of ban it and make rules and sort of take over a bunch of different exchanges, right? Nationalize it.
Capitulated 7 times, I think, right?
Yeah. And so, we just never seen an actual nation state go after. Now, we have seen light touch or relatively light touch regulation for the first world countries for the most part, like London, England, UK, United States and such. For example, we call it a couple different things, like a commodity and a money, various different departments, but we haven't, for example, made it 100% illegal. And if you look at Japan, of course, they've made it legal tender. So I think that we're going in the correct direction there when it comes to nation states and their relationship with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. We're heading sort of in the right direction there. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't come eventually and attack even harder, but understand that Bitcoin and the internet are these technologies that allow the power of a nation state to be congealed down to a single person. The single person now has the ability that an entire nation state had just 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, and here you have Switzerland, right? You have Switzerland jumping out and they created, I guess, the first ETF.
Yeah, Gabriel, go ahead.
Russ, have you ever used BISC? Russ?
No.
That is a decentralized exchange that puts all the power in the individual's hands. It's exactly what you're talking about. So this is something you really need to look into before you want to talk too much more about this issue, because a decentralized exchange specifically does that, exactly that. Every person runs their own desktop software that's communicating over the internet, not over the web. There's no centralized server. Everybody's communicating with each other, and you find a price by placing orders, and this decentralized.
I actually hear where he's going with that.
Other end. What's that?
Yeah, you broke up a little, Gabriel, but yeah, we heard.
I see what he's saying. I agree with that.
Yeah. And that's great. And that's what, that's what we're good. That's what we're trying to share with people too, is technologies like BISC and of course, these types of information, these types of information technologies that empower the individual. This is what we like to share about. So let's go ahead. And I think we can move on to the next topic, guys. Before we do that, we would appreciate if you guys could share out the show. If you guys like what you're seeing, please hit that thumbs up. We would really appreciate if the audio listeners could give us a review on iTunes. That would be great. And then if you guys, we also have the the super chat going, guys, on the side. If you guys want to go ahead and give us a tip or ask us a question there, you can use the super chat in YouTube to do that. And of course, we always have our donation button available. So thanks, guys, so much again for joining. We're going to go to our second topic here. We have a couple different topics left. Let's go to well, let's introduce it first. That would help. So this topic, guys, is called another SEC topic, guys. The SEC cracks down on 2 more ICOs, now believed to be creating a template for the future enforcement. I want to ask the panels, pretty much if this is the end of ICOs, because they've now made it, the SEC has now made it very clear that tokens that fit within the Howey test are actually securities. And we've seen these ICOs get targeted now, not even for fraud. These newest ones are targeted not for fraud, but for the failure to register as security. So again, it looks like the SEC is sort of has a playbook where they start very small and they ratchet it up, they ratchet it up, and now we're to the point where they're actually enforcing on some ICOs that have not committed fraud yet. So let's talk to Russell. Let's get you first this time, Russell. Russell, what are your thoughts on this? Is this sort of the end of ICOs for sure? Like, I mean, is all ICOs now going to just leave and jump shit with the US, because the SEC is now clearly starting to enforce harder and harder on the regulations?
Well, I think once you have economic sovereignty, then you're concerned about free speech, and this would be one aspect of it. I think right now it's just people are disempowered, especially because of the money that we use and how we've organized our work, how we even organized our intimate relationships. I'm all MGTOW, but there's ways in which they're able to go and they are able to coerce the body throughout this, the status quo. So, look, once people are empowered, I think the SEC, a lot of these government bodies just won't be able to do what they want to do. But that's a long way away. But again, what Bitcoin does is it gives you sovereignty in the most important way, the most fundamental way. So is that going to be a game changer in there? As far as the ICOs are right now, they may have actually bit off more than they could chew. And that's unfortunate. A few of them I do kind of like, but I'm sure they'll be able to progress and do what they need to do through the normal routes until a better time.
Yep. It seems like they're coming down harder and harder. They sent these cease and desist orders to these 2 ICOs by the name of Paragon and AirFox, and I believe AirFox raised 15 million and Paragon raised 12 million, and it looks like they only have to pay back 250,000. Like, that's the only penalty. So again, seems like the SEC is starting soft, right? They're starting soft. They raised 15 million, only charging 250K in fines. What's the next one? Because obviously all these fines are pretty much arbitrary to the SEC. They can just sort of tack on anything they want. Let's go with Zach on this next. Zach, what do you think about this? Is this really like the end of ICOs in the US? And is the SEC now going to start going after all of these other ICOs even harder than they were before? Or how about this? Do you see a pattern in the SEC, like I see it, where they're starting light and they're increasing their game? They're upping their game more and more.
Yeah. I think so. I'll add two comments. One is just a quick tip. I'm pulling up the SEC's press release on AirFox and Paragon right now. A state regulator once told me that the best way to read these SEC press releases is to start at the bottom and read them backwards. At the bottom, you'll see all of the names of these people who took this action. And a lot of these are big names that you'll recognize from other ICO and token and exchange, basically this space in general actions over the past 12 to 18 months. And then the paragraph above that generally tells you whether or not the parties that were acted against cooperated. And that's key. And I think that's partly why in the EtherDelta and in the Paragon and AirFox cases, some of these numbers are a little bit lower than what you might expect. And especially in EtherDelta, some people were kind of shocked by how big those numbers were, but I think they were much smaller than what they could have been because of the cooperation that Zachary offered. And in this case, there was a significant amount of cooperation also. Expect these numbers to increase as more and more projects are acted against that do not cooperate. But essentially, the way you need to understand, in my opinion at least, the SEC's strategy right now is sort of playing regulatory bingo, where they're building up very new precedent for a series of cases that are going to be acted against in the future. And they don't want to take on the top dogs, the biggest profile projects right away. I mean, Ripple, maybe, for example, is a project a lot of people like to throw out as an unregistered security. They're not going to take on Ripple head on, or a similar project. if they were to take on a huge high-profile project like Ripple, they would want a large body of precedent supporting that action, and that's sort of what they're accumulating right now. By going after certain token projects and certain decentralized exchanges and the founders of certain decentralized exchanges, basically crossing off a lot of boxes to help future action. So these numbers aren't super big given the cooperation, which I think the SEC very much appreciates as part of its effort in building this sort of body of precedent. But not every project will cooperate. And so the numbers will get bigger and the profiles of the projects they go after will also increase. That's basically the perspective I see all of this action under.
Gotcha. So we do see then precedents being set. We do see a trajectory. We do see them ramping up more and more. So very interesting point. I just want to read this quote from Nick Carter real quick. He tweeted this out. He says, "The SEC is working their way up the ICO totem pole, starting with the most obvious and easiest targets until they have the accumulated weight of case law to tackle the big ones." Like you say, Zach, like Ripple and stuff. They don't want another SAC Capital Advisors debacle. So yeah, I guess in short, it looks like that the screws are tightening on these ICOs, and it really does seem reasonable to expect them to tighten more. So let's go with Gabriel. Sorry, Zach. Please go ahead.
Just one more quick comment. I will keep it brief. People should realize that, so the SEC gets a lot of headlines for the actions it takes, but state regulators are really the first line of defense for investors against these scams and whatnot. So if you really want to focus and stay attuned with how securities regulators are acting against these scams and whatnot, focus on state localities. For example, Texas led the charge against BitConnect, and there's Operation Crypto Sweep, which is an amalgamation of a bunch of different state regulatory offices going against these scams. The SEC is just sort of on a higher level, going against high-profile cases, doing their thing. And it's sort of a different league. The first line of defense, and I would argue maybe the most interesting regulatory action, comes from state regulators first, and then sort of bigger whales are passed on to the SEC. And they take care of this thing like building precedent and whatnot. So focus on states, despite how many headlines SEC action gets.
Yeah, makes sense. Very much makes sense. All right, let's go to Gabriel. Gabriel, let's see what your thoughts are on the SEC cracking down here on these two ICOs. What do you think?
Before I tell you my thoughts, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. I can hear you good.
Fantastic. Yeah, so I actually this subject kind of earlier with the ICOs. I think the SEC, like you pointed out, is warming up, and agreement with Russ that eventually there won't be any budget for an SEC at all, and there will be a budget for private sort of adjudication companies, but as with public ones, now they can easily be gamed, and as with Moody's and other, they're corrupt too. So it's always going to be a race between researchers and investors to try to find out the truth and figure out who's in whose pocket. And the illusion of a centralized government entity maintaining objectivity is crumbling, thank goodness, and a lot more people are starting to realize that a regulatory capture is a thing, and the incentives are all misaligned. So yeah, it'll be an interesting road to watch the budgets evaporate as fiat currencies collapse and hyperinflate over the coming couple decades. And after that, we're going to be in a more of a Wild West situation with investments where you'll have to do more due diligence, and companies will be doing research and development, or just research and adjudication services, and they're going to have to work very hard to maintain a pristine reputation in a full free market environment that Bitcoin is going to bring about.
Great points, Gabriel. Great points. They're going to have to compete hard, man. I think a lot of people are saying this. Even Tim Draper are saying this now, saying this a lot these days. Basically, like the governments are going to have to compete for us, right? That's going to be the future that's going to happen. Is because when the power of the nation state resides in an individual now, the individual can create all sorts of different federations and group and working bodies that others can join, right?
Exactly. So, look how fast Coinbase has grown.
Yeah, I mean, it's growing. Coinbase literally has hundreds of millions of users. They have more, at least last I heard, they had over 21 million users, which means that if every user in Coinbase wanted a Bitcoin, they couldn't have one. So yeah, it is growing pretty crazy, and you know, obviously we have cycles, bull markets and bear markets, and we grow exponentially more in the bull markets. But still, this is the reality of the situation. The tools are now, you know, to bring about individual sovereignty are proliferating here pretty crazy. So let's get any final last points from everybody on this topic before we move on. Let's go ahead, Russell, you first.
Well, I think Zach gave an incredible analysis of the whole situation as it's going to unfold as far as how they want to. But I do believe, like, look, this is a wild card. This is such a wild card moment. And, you know, they're going to want to play by their normal games and rules. But this whole cryptocurrency space is evolving so much more faster than they can keep up.
Yep, definitely agree with that. Zach, your final points on your final thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I do agree. It is evolving very quickly, and I'll shill Coin Center really quickly. I think so. I'm not an anarchist. Maybe I'm the only one on this panel, but I've sort of made that clear in Medium posts and Twitter commentary and whatnot. I think Coin Center does a lot of good work informing regulators and sort of keeping as light a touch as possible. Sometimes their hands are tied, and if you don't follow the laws as explicitly written, you're going to run into some hard times because the rule of law is obviously something we think is important for civilized societies. But that's a can of worms for another day. The gist of this, I think, is the SEC and other state regulators are playing bingo with all of these cases. And once they have bingo, then they have a sufficient amount of precedent to start going against increasingly higher profile cases. And securities law isn't the only thing that they're going to enforce. They're going to go against consumer protection law violations and whatnot. I was at the Cordoza Law School just the other week listening to a panel of state regulators, and one lady made the comment from Delaware, I believe, that the party is literally just getting started. As one of the other panelists mentioned, we've been talking about this for months, that all of these are unregistered securities, and now these agencies are starting to act. But this is like very, very early on. We're going to see a boatload more of securities violations actions, and then a whole bunch of different types of actions unrelated to securities registration in the future. So if you don't like regulation talk, you probably should tune out Bitcoin or like crypto news for a while, because we're going to have a lot of this coming down the pipeline. It excites me. I think it's very interesting, but I'm an outlier maybe. So that's my take.
We tried to tell you guys. I mean, you know, people like Tone Vase, people like myself, people like Zach. You know, we tried to tell you guys for a long time that 99% of these things on Ethereum are all unregistered securities, guys. They're all unregistered, unlicensed securities, and most of them are probably going to get subpoenaed and go to jail. Now, again, the SEC, as we said, is moving slowly so that they can build up to more bigger cases, but it's coming, guys. And like you say, Zach, if you guys don't like regulation talk, you know, that's what's going to be on the docket here for the next few months as the world figure this out. This is what we do in a bear market, right? This is expected. We figure this all out now so that the next bull market has this information. We can we have some more known knowns, right? And we can go higher. So
well, the interesting part though is how is the space going to respond rationally? That to me is also equally important to attend to.
Yep, good point. Gabriel, let's get your final thoughts on this topic before we move on. Gabriel.
Nope.
No final thoughts. Okay, well, he's already all right. Gabriel already gave us some of his thoughts, so they were pretty clear and concise. So that makes sense, Gabriel.
Nope.
All right, so let's go on to our final topic, guys. For the day, we've already almost at an hour, so we can get it here. We can get this pretty close. The final topic for the day, guys, is the sanctions being removed. The sanctions removing Iran from SWIFT, guys. For the first time in history, it looks like Iran has been completely removed / ejected from the SWIFT banking system. Now, this is pretty interesting because, of course, this essentially prevents Iran from sending and receiving transactions to and from its allies. You know, we have several merchants, though, already on the ground in Iran, already using crypto, including things like major hotels. It's going to get kind of crazy. So let me ask, let's go with Gabriel first then, since you didn't get a comment in the last one, Gabriel. Let's go with you first. What are your thoughts on these, on Iran getting removed from SWIFT and on them actually talking about partnering with Russia to start more of a cryptocurrency competitor to SWIFT? What do you think, Gabriel?
Cryptocurrency competitor to SWIFT is like such a questionable phrase. It's actually kind of stupid. SWIFT is completely centralized, And if you were to make a like cooperative system between Iran and Russia, it would also be centralized between two parties. This is not comparable, and to like it's basically lipstick on a pig. You know, it's dough marketing on the same old BS. So you know, any system that they might come up with is going to, which China and Russia, I believe, already have. I can't remember the name of it, but it's just another, you know, system. Yes, they do use cryptography. It's 80s cryptography, 70s cryptography that they've used for, you know, centralized digital asset trade for, you know, 30, 40 years. So, you know, all this stuff is just kind of boring. Now, the real nugget in the article is like the hostel company that's accepting only crypto for, you know, booking hostel rooms. You cannot use any other thing, you know, any other payment type on the web. That's, you know, Bitcoin is the currency of the internet, and you know, these type of you know, excision globals is exactly what Bitcoin is made for. So this is the real use cases that you know, Bitcoin sort of advocates talk about, is you know, people being you know, regular people. You know, the Iranian citizens have no, you know, they're probably most of them are against what it's doing. So still deserve to be able to you know, transact on the internet. So this is what Bitcoin advocates like ourselves have been talking about for years, and this is exactly what it's meant to route around. It's a censorship resistant value transfer protocol for the internet, and it needs, in a situation, if they're smart, everybody will it up. I have a feeling that a lot of people will resist because of the, you know, technical hurdles involved. But any smart companies are going to be jumping right on board. So this is just what it's made for. The Swift alternative thing is just like a nothing burger, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it could, you know, work. It certainly can work, but it's no real solution like Bitcoin is.
Yep, absolutely true. Now, I do want to quote this professor here. He says that Mr. Steve Keen. He says the U.S. has gone rogue and cannot be allowed to dictate economic or political policy to the rest of the world. Now, that's just funny because obviously it's coming from a U.S. person, right? But this system that we just spoke of, that maybe Iran and Russia working together with, they'll, of course, like you say, Gabriel, it'll still be centralized for them, right? So eventually you're going to need a system to route around that, right? So that's why Bitcoin is here. Bitcoin routes around all of those systems, not just the U.S. And of course, the U.S. is the main system you want to route around right now, and that's great. But just if they just be advised, guys, if other countries build a similar system, you're going to probably need to route around that as well. And that's why Bitcoin is great, guys. It's really, really, really amazing to have this censorship resistant protocol available to everybody with an internet connection. So let's go with Zach next on this topic. Zach, what are your thoughts on Rand getting ejected from Swift here? Do you think that they will be able to create some kind of alternative to the U.S.? And do you think that anybody will even use that alternative? And what do you think, like, the average citizen is, what do you think the average citizen on the ground is going to use? Are they going to use these big, huge systems that are fighting with each other, right? Or are they going to use something like Bitcoin?
Yeah. So you can't kick anyone out for using Bitcoin. I think that's the simplest way to put it. I agree with Gabriel that obviously the Swift Bitcoin network comparisons aren't perfect, but the analogy still stands that in existing financial infrastructure right now for the global economy, there's a lot of centralization and power, and kicking Iran out of Swift or from refusing access to Iran via Swift is a perfect example of that. Nick Carter likes to say that Swift is sort of an enforcement branch of the United States government. I think that's a little bit inaccurate because the government put a lot of pressure on Swift to kick Iran out. Much more pressure than you might say Congress put on, say, PayPal or something to cut off payments for different political advocates that the federal government doesn't really like, that sort of thing. But the point of the matter is that we now have a case in point that federal governments around the world can leverage political power to kick people out of these financial networks. There's an asymmetric power relationship, and global hegemons like Russia or the US or whatnot can sort of bully other nations. And that can't happen with Bitcoin. Whether or not there will be like a replacement, like Iran or like smaller country Swift or something like that, I don't really know. I don't necessarily think that's a possibility, although it could be. But I think they'll turn to building other non-censorable financial networks on top of maybe something like Bitcoin or maybe Ethereum. I don't really know. But the point is, I know for a fact Iran and a lot of other countries recognize the potential of uncensorable financial networks. North Korea mines Bitcoin and has been for most people for longer than most people that have been in this space, that are in this space right now have been in this space. And I think down the road, a lot of people will sort of wrestle with the ethical problems that may come from like a murderous dictator like Kim Jong-un using our same network. But that's sort of the troubling beauty of it all, that anyone can use it regardless of who they are, and regardless of your political affiliations. Kicking Iran out of SWIFT proves that this system is outdated and something better is needed. And fortunately, in my opinion, we have something better, which is Bitcoin and all of the payment layers that will be and are being built on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, everybody seems to not like the US dollar for reasons just like this, guys. I mean, remember they censored WikiLeaks. I mean, countless times, countless invasions over the US dollar and control over the petrodollar and all of this stuff, guys. All of this this death and mass murder and all of these things, all of these wars, it comes down to currency wars, and it comes down to these political currencies, as Tim Draper likes to call them, instead of fiat. This is why Bitcoin is here. This is how Bitcoin gets adopted, right? Is from when these types of actions get taken place, they serve as an example, as a reflection of what these centralized entities are capable of. And we need to now look at this, view this from an objective point of view, and build something better, right? And that's what Bitcoin is here to do. That's what Bitcoin is here. And as you say, Zach, now we have all sorts of layers that we're building on top of Bitcoin that can even, help facilitate all sorts of different transactions and just compete with every single facet of the traditional financial system. At least at some point, we'll definitely be able to do that. We're building the rails now, right? We're building the foundations now. So very, very good point, Zach. Let's go with Russell then. What is your thoughts on this topic on Iran getting kicked out of SWIFT? What do you think?
Well, it's expected, right? It's expected that they're going to use whatever tools they can to bring every nation back in line with the U.S. dollar hegemony, right? That's what they do, and that's their main form of power, both on the individual and on rogue states. They want to define it as rogue state. They're, I don't see Russia building, a huge wall of NATO enforced, military and power might bases all around it, and China too. I mean, we are, I think, quite literally, it's American empire, and we're using our status as world reserve, and we've got tug, we're going to pull it. But make no mistake about it, guys. Governments serve the interests of those people who own and control the economy. If they're going to end up taking action against those people in the crypto space or in all these other governments, it's because people in the financial markets, the incumbents, need it, and they need it badly. And Bitcoin, again, is a huge wild card. Maybe we're underappreciating. Maybe I'm overappreciating it. But I think that now's the time. Now's the time, I think, that people need to really start looking at these really creative. The world needs smart disruptors. And I think the beautiful part of Bitcoin is it's gonna capitalize smart disruptors. That, to me, is the most disruptive part of Bitcoin. Is that people with ideas are going to go out there and they're going to have the money to do it. They're not going to have to appeal to these to the financial industry and their monopoly over credit. It's just going to be gone. It's a game changer. And the SEC is going to do as much as they can, but they're not going to do it fast enough. They're not going to do it smart enough. They're just not going to be able to compete with the pace of innovation that's going on. And look, I know these guys out there. They're more speculators probably. We're going to shake those guys out. We're going to shake them out because the people who believed in Bitcoin are still going to be in here, and I don't care what price it's at. We're still going to be the foundation of this thing. And the guys, Vortex is out there, and Gabriel's out there that are able to bring in the resources to actually start building this stuff is going to make the biggest difference. And they're going to be the ones that are going to be capitalized, guys. And all I got to ask, like the community, the crypto space, is like, what kind of world are you going to want? Think ahead, guys. What kind of world do you want? How do you want to change this world? What kind of world do you want to live in? What kind of world do you want to leave for your children? What kind of communities do you want to help create? And you're going to have that power and the means to do that, regardless, right, of this state power, of what the SEC is going to have to do, because they're only going to slow us down. They're only going to affect the bottom line. And the politicians, and this is what I'm saying, We can't just look at decentralization in terms of money. We're already looking at this, and we're seeing the tremendous impact this has across social, cultural, economic, political lines. We're seeing just what disruption decentralization of money will do. I'm only saying that we have to think bigger. We have to think about what kind of world is going to be when we decentralize the intimate relationships. I know it sounds out there, but you could go out and invest all your energy, guys. Every man in this crypto space will go out and they'll create wealth. They'll create these new platforms. They'll create new code, create real value, and the courts, family courts, and all this stuff is going to take it out of you. And then you look at how we've organized work. I always talk. Gabriel doesn't like this part of it because look, I support democratically run worker cooperatives. That's decentralizing work. All right, and we need to think about this. And as much as I try to talk about it to libertarians don't like the word democracy because they think it's a tyranny of the majority. And I'm only going to always inject the idea. Then, are you supporting the tyranny of the minority? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and we do hear you talk about that, once in a while on Twitter, and that's great. Like this is I hope, Russell, that it's people like you, man, that makes out when Bitcoin is $1 million a coin. I hope it's people like you that have Bitcoin, because again, it's people like you that are thinking about these types of things, that are thinking about disruption, that are thinking about the ways that we, that corruption runs through our society. This is what we're going to fix, right? Can
I say this one last thing though? Yeah. The way you want to disrupt work is create an incubator. If you guys are going to have a lot of capital out of this crypto, consider creating an incubator for democratically run worker cooperatives. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
I definitely. I'm looking forward to today when more and more Bitcoiners every day, get more and more FU money. That's the goal. And with people that are as smart as Bitcoiners having some capital, it's going to be an interesting world. Because remember, as Russell said, we are going to have hodlers of last resort. All the weekends will get shaken out, whatever that takes. If that goes all the way down to 1,000, so be it. But it won't. But even if it does, then so
I'm ready to buy.
Go ahead, Gabriel. You got something?
Yeah, I want to chime in. I think that things are kind of going in a very, like we discussed before, a peer-to-peer direction, right? Where individuals are empowered and in these decentralized systems. And I think the idea of a workers' collective is like a 20th century framework or paradigm that's falling apart. And I think that what we're going to be looking toward is large systems with nobody at the top, networks of workers. I wrote a.
I do see where he's going with this. I do see where he's saying it. Look, open decentralized platforms is going to be perfect for those things, but somebody has to be the owner. If you leave ownership in the hands of corporate monopolies like we are now, it's going to be the worst worker dystopia you can imagine.
Well, the idea is to have like a more DAO type of thing, right? Where we can distribute, the ownership and things like that. So we don't have these top down, but that's the future, guys. That's what crypto is here to do. It's to trim the fat. It's to create, real crypto like Bitcoin, right? It's here to trim the fat. It's here to get rid of the intermediaries, and it's here to make things simpler, more peer-to-peer. So that's, I think, what's going to happen in the future. And I think with that, guys, we can leave it unless anybody has any final things to say on this. I think we can end the show. No? All right. Well, thanks, guys, so much for watching. We really had a great time. We went a little bit over an hour there, but we had some great topics, some great comments. I really like to thank everybody for joining us in the chat. We had some great chat, and if you guys missed the show, definitely join us in the comments. But let's go ahead and say goodbye to our panelists and find out where we can find out more information about them. Zach, where can we find out more info about you, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Vortex. It's great to be back on the show. I'm just on Twitter. My show is at the Coin Pod. A little bit of a hiatus right now. Back in 2019, I tweet from my personal account at Zach Full. And I do other things also, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah. The big the podcast, man. I was on there. Had a great time. The Coin Pod podcast. The yes. Coin Pod podcast. Why do you have to make it so difficult of a name? Damn it, Zach. But anyway, the Coin Pod podcast, guys. Check that out. Really great. All right, Russell. Where can we find out more about you, sir?
Oh no, you won't. I say nothing that anybody's interested in. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Well, you'll definitely be able to find his Twitter account.
Thank you for having me on again. Now I love it.
You bet. And you'll definitely be able to find Russell's information on the show notes, guys, for sure. Gabriel looks like he just dipped out, but you can definitely find more about Gabriel on his Twitter account, Gabriel D. Vine. To date, he has not been served a gag order. So definitely follow him on Twitter. He has a lot of great information stuff, guys. He's really in the space just as much as anybody else, starting his own companies and things like that. Not quite as much on crypto Twitter maybe as the rest of us, but definitely give him a follow. He's got a lot of good stuff to say. So thanks again, guys, so much for joining us. We will be here, of course, next Sunday at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, as we always are, talking Bitcoin on the Bitcoin News Show. We just released a couple other episodes too, guys. We just had a crypto Q&A on Thursday. That was great. And we just released another episode of Bitcoin Matters with Beauty on. So that was a great show as well. Make sure you check that out. A lot of talk about libertarianism in that episode. So lots more shows to come, guys. So make sure you check us out. Give us a thumbs up. Give us some tips, and we really appreciate it. So until next time, guys, keep talking Bitcoin. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.